Hello guys, thank you very much for your time. Welcome back to Mr. Michael's channel for extraordinary young people for another video. And this one is called A Guide to the Summary Task Part 1 and is focused on the CIE O-Level English Paper 2, Reading for Ideas, which is the second section. Now, if you are not familiar with the structure of the exam, you know by now what you have to do. Please go back to Mr. Michael's channel and look for the video called A Guide to Paper 2. And that will help you, that will give you all of the information that you need in order to ace this O-Level exam. Now, what are we going to do in this video? Well, we are going to, first of all, look at an O-Level sample paper from 2018, and the link is in the description of the video. It is openly available to anyone who wants to go and download it. Then what we are going to do after that is we're going to identify how to take notes in the reading from ideas section of the paper. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to learn how to find the most important points in the text. Okay, so let's get down to business. Now, this is section 1, reading for ideas. From now on, we're going to call it the summary task because that's what it is. Now, the instructions say read passage 1 called theatre in the insert and answer all the questions below. You know that the insert contains the text that you are going to use for this question, and the text will always be factual. Section 1A of the summary task is called notes, and it instructs you to identify and write down the information from the passage which describes the stages in the development of theatre and the reasons for its continuing popularity in the present day. Now, I have highlighted 2 sections of the text that you are going to receive. If you want to look at the whole text, and I advise that you should go to the link in the box underneath this video and download it from the Cambridge website, and it will become a little bit more clear to you. But basically, the text will be divided into 2 parts. The first part of the text deals with the stages in the development of theatre, and I've highlighted that in a rather fetching yellow colour. The second half of the text will deal with the reasons for its continuing popularity in the present day. So what you have to do is you have to read through the passage and you have to identify and write down the key points, the most important information for both of those topics, the stages in the development of theatre and the reasons for its continuing popularity in the present day. Now, I've also highlighted some other information inside these red boxes. The first one says, at this stage, you do not need to use your own words. Very, very important to remember that. You can copy out of the text. You don't want to copy too much, but we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But you don't have to paraphrase. You don't have to write the sentences or the information in your own words in this task. Now, you will also be awarded up to 12 marks for content points. So if you want full marks, you need to write down at least 12 points. Now, the problem is that sometimes we make mistakes. So we would advise you to write down 3 extra if you can. Write down 15 content points, because if you do make a mistake, the examiner will jump over the one that you got wrong and continue marking until he reaches the end, he or she reach the end of your paper. And the last thing that I've highlighted in the red box there is an example. As you can see, the exam paper will always give you the first example in each category. So the first example of a stage in the development of theatre is that in ancient Greece, myths or legends were narrated by a chorus or by chanting. So that is always included. You will have one example to help you get your bearings. Now, some of my more cheeky students ask me, oh, Mr. Michael, do we get a point for the example? Do you get a point for the example? Of course you don't get a point for the example because you didn't write it down. It came from the examiner. So another thing to avoid is don't copy it out. Don't write it out yourself because you won't get any points for it. Okay, so let's move on to the text. This is the text from the sample paper 2018, which, as I said, is freely available on the Cambridge website. The link is below in the description of this video. I would recommend that you pause the video now and have a read through this for a minute or so, and then catch me on the other side. Go on, go read it. Great. So I hope that you've read all the way through. Now, the first thing that I have done is I have highlighted there in yellow the example that was given to us by the examiner. So what we need to do now is we need to highlight the next point. Where is the next stage in the development of theatre? Where is it? Well, if you thought it was this one here, which says, then came the idea of including the dramatic impersonation of someone in the storyline. In other words, acting. And an actor was introduced into the performance. That is the second point. And how would we record that? How would we write it down? Do we need to copy the entire sentence out? I don't think that's necessary. So I think we could do something like this. Actors were introduced. Or the dramatic impersonation of people was introduced. Or even acting introduced. So we don't have to copy out the whole sentence. We just need to find the most important part and then we write that down. Okay, let's look for the next point. Where do you think it is? Ah, there it is. It's the next sentence. Plots were made more complicated by the addition of a second or even third actor, although the scope for convincing acting was limited by the fact that the actors wore masks to represent the characters they were portraying. So the next point is in blue, but again, do we need to write down all of those 3 lines that are highlighted? I don't think so. So what I would do is I would put the following. Plots were made more complicated by the addition of a second or even third character, because the additional information there, although the scope for convincing acting was limited by the fact that the actors wore masks to represent the characters they were portraying, is not a stage in the development of theatre. Rather, it's just additional information to help explain the point. So I'm going to do one more. Let's have a look. Now, what do you think the next or the final point in this paragraph is? What's the next stage in the development of theatre? Well, I have highlighted it in a rather fetching reddish, purple, pink color. And it says, at first, only tragedies were performed, but the introduction of comedy, with its often cruel satire of contemporary society, appealed to the ordinary people, thus increasing the popularity of drama. Now, in that big red block there, what is the most important piece of information? What is the next stage in the development of theatre? Well, it's the introduction of comedy. So you don't need to write out the whole long sentence, because not all of it is relevant. Not all of it is important. Some of it is additional information. Some of it adds extra oomph to the point. But the most important point is the introduction of comedy. So let's have a look at our answers. We would have written down on our answer sheet, actors were introduced. Plots were made more complicated by the addition of a second or even third character, and the introduction of comedy. Now, so there we have 3 points. How many points do we need to get full marks? I hope you shouted 12, because yes, you need 12. How many did I recommend that you write down? I hope you screamed 15, because that's how many you are recommended to write, just in case you make some mistake. Okay, so let's bring this video to an end by doing a quick recap of what we've covered. The first thing is that you need at least 12 pieces of information. That's very important. Remember that you can add a few more to be safe. The second thing that we covered is that you do not need to write in your own words. No paraphrasing is required in this task. And the last thing is that you do not need to include any unnecessary information. When you are identifying the most important points, do not include anything which just adds additional information. Try to include only the main points. I hope the video was useful to you. If you have any questions, please ask them below. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you for your time. See ya.